and welcome to the latest edition of NETSOL's podcast series, Wired and Inspired, where we look at the human stories and inspiring personal journeys of our asset and auto finance industry's leaders. I'm Jason Hurwitz, and today I'm delighted to welcome Jim Higginbotham.
Thank you.
Many will know Jim from working with, or indeed for him, at various senior industry roles across commercial leadership and risk management. Roles that spanned a career in lending at HSBC, GE Capital, Barclays, NatWest Lombard, and even a short stint at UBS. Jim went on to take the helm of fast-growing broker-lender Star Asset as CEO, before taking on a very high-profile role as CEO of the NACFB, driving progress and improvement in the UK's vibrant commercial finance broker community. In this role, Jim has visibly brought a steadying leadership hand through what has been, by anyone's definition, a volatile period. Whilst perhaps only Lloyds haven't had the pleasure of Jim's employment, what has been a constant has been Jim the person, known for his warm humanity, open collaboration style, and a relentless pursuit of progress in whatever you turn your hand to. Today, we get the rare privilege to go beyond the press release and understand what makes Jim tick, and what has influenced his journey, and what are Jim's views on where things are going, and indeed, what might the impact of technology bring. So, Jim, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. Let's start with the first question. So, how would you describe your career journey so far?
Well, clear from the intro, I've been a bit of a corporate tart, haven't I, really? Starting sort of back in 1990, joining Midland Bank, I was a career graduate intake. Realised I would have been an absolutely dreadful engineer, so I went into banking. And I've had a real privilege of almost doing every type of finance you could think of. So started with corporate banking, went into investment banking, private banking, leasing, working for big corporates, working for independent banks, working for brokerages, and then tried my hand at actually running my own business as a broker and realized I was terrible at that. And that's actually a very hard job. So give me a great appreciation for what brokers do on a day-to-day basis, and then end up where I am today. So I don't know what's really taken me on that journey in terms of the conscious steps. But I've always sort of enjoyed working in the finance industry, the people I've met, because it is a people industry ultimately, and the different challenges, as you can probably imagine by that career path. I don't get bored easily, but I love a challenge, and I'm not very good at steady state. I like to try and fix stuff.
I get the impression you couldn't walk past a broken window.
There's something wrong with my head. I quite like to fix stuff. Yeah, it's walking past things that are broken, or indeed just sitting by and watching things work really well. Neither of them inspire me, really.
Understood. So on that thread, in terms of inspiration, what would have been the standout highlight parts of your career so far?
Well, as I say, I've been very fortunate. I've had a few, but the things that stand out for me, obviously, getting that first job is always a big one, and getting a grounding in a big bank is a wonderful training ground. But I would say that my first step out of that into GE, where I went from the UK into an international career working out of Brussels, that was a huge step for me.
How old were you approximately at the time?
Late 20s, I would say. Unmarried, so I'm still a single man in Brussels.
Time was your own?
Yeah, and with responsibility for Europe. So I was on a plane a lot. It was jet setting when jet setting was fun. Didn't have a lot of money, but was was ultimately going around European capital cities and having a wonderful time and learning an awful lot, because GE is a bit of a love it or hate it type company, I think, and I loved it, and it was good to me. So that was a really big moment working for GE, and the sort of knowledge that I brought with that. In terms of inspirational steps, there were two really proud moments, both people related. One was in Lombard, and one's actually just recently, in the NACFB, where we did employee survey results. And it's talking of fixing stuff. So when I came into both those roles, the employee survey results were not where you'd want them to be. And we did a lot of very conscious work around team building, trusts, making people feel that they're listened to and ultimately respected and valued. And both those situations turned around massively. We only got the results a couple of weeks ago for the NACFB, but again, really proud moments where you think, I've had a small part to play in that shift of attitudes and happiness within where people are working.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the other one that I'd be remiss not to mention is when I was with GE. So GE don't really pay bonuses so much, but they send you on nice holidays if you do well. And one of their reward schemes was called the Pinnacle Scheme, right? So they sent me and my partner at that time, now my wife, to Rio de Janeiro and did a cruise to Buenos Aires, right?
Just the two of you, or a whole employee?
So this is, imagine this, you're on a boat with about 150 GE people, right? Not the most, you wouldn't necessarily sign up to that, but being a true Yorkshireman and spendthrift, I thought, right, I'm at the base of Corcovado on a beautiful holiday. It would be remiss not to propose at this point. So I actually proposed to my wife on the base of Corcovado. No, it wasn't pre-planned, as you see. And what sounds like quite a romantic scenario is that Corcovado was covered in scaffolding at the time, and I didn't have a ring. But apart from that, it was perfect.
Good contrast.
Yeah, it was perfect. Yeah.
And she said yes.
Yeah. And she said yes, thankfully. Yeah, absolutely.
That's helpful. Very good, very good. For those sorts of moments in that G, you had some great adventures by the sounds.
I've had some great adventures everywhere I've worked, to be honest. I've rarely had a really bad time. There's been bad moments, but not bad times. I don't regret anything.
Yeah, very good, very good. And so you come across, and everyone knows you for your humanity. You like fixing things. You have a natural work ethic. Where does that come from? Is it from work early years? Is it family setting? What are the sort of drivers of your work ethic, would you say?
I think it's born out of home, fundamentally. My dad left school when he was 16 to climb telegraph poles for Yorkshire Electricity Board. He did the same degree as me on his way to work on the bus. So I'd always had a role model that worked hard and ultimately delivered.
There's some grit there, I'd imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And his style of leadership was very common sense. Treat people with respect. It's not rocket science, as he would say. And my mum was the ethical core. Her mantra was treat people as you expect to be treated. And a combination of those two things has really seen me pretty all right. So yeah, no, they're the cruxes of it. I think my style...
That gave you some foundational values there, which are true in any setting, right? Social or professional.
Absolutely. I mean, I've always been very logical and very scientifically structured in my thinking, which is good in one way, but sometimes it leaves you a little bit wanting on the emotional intelligence side of things. So I've always been very good at structuring my work, structuring my day, structuring my thought processes. But sometimes when I get stressed or when I get overly sort of focused on something, that emotional peripheral vision starts to go a little bit blurry. And I tend to surround myself with people who can compensate in that regard and can tap me on the shoulder and go, "Oh, Jim, there's someone over there that really needs you."
They might need a little arm around them at this point. Yeah. But it's about recognizing that in yourself, isn't it? And you build a team of different people around you. It's age-old management theory, not creating anything new here, but,
no, absolutely,
but recognizing those strengths and weaknesses is fundamental.
G was great like that, because rather than sort of at the review process, telling you to list all the things that you've done well, it actually said, okay, well, what do you need to develop? And you actually had to highlight your own gaps and help develop them. And that was a really insightful period of time where you get to confront your weaknesses, and you don't necessarily have to spend all your time trying to fix them yourself. You just have to compensate for them from a team perspective to make sure you've got that. Yeah,
it's not necessarily about turning the weaknesses into a strength, because there's a lot of theory to say that you can't do that.
Yeah,
but you can make them better or compensate them in other ways by having people around you.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly that. And in terms of sort of your leadership style, and in terms of how would you reflect on that?
So there's a couple of people, I guess, who I think with leaders, that whole concept of mirroring the leader is a real truism. And I've been lucky enough to work with some great people who I would deem as really great leaders. A couple of standouts. So there's a chap called Gareth Davis, who is the guy that brought me into GE. a very gregarious Welshman, and he gave me all the rope I needed to hang myself. Sent me around Europe on various sort of missions, as it were. But I always knew I could pull on that rope, and I loved that autonomy. But I also knew loved that safety blanket, and that's an approach I try and deploy with my teams and give them as much space as they want and as much autonomy as they can handle, knowing that there's an umbrella above them and they're not going to get caught out, as it were. So that was a great one. There's another chap who will be.
I heard a phrase around that, if I may briefly interject, which is similar, and it's definitely a banking framework type phrase, and it's freedom in a framework.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly that. Yeah. So you've got that sort of structural element to it, but then there's also the psychological piece around how do you create followership. Yeah. I've never been a big testosterone fueled alpha. I always like to lead through collaboration, lead through getting my hands dirty, and proving that I can do it, and earning the respect of the people I work with, which takes time. People don't always just switch on a respect button. You've got to earn that type of thing. But there was one individual I've worked with who will be very familiar with the industry, a chap called Andy Harp, who now heads up the corporate bank at Investec. But we worked together on the same leadership team at Lombard. And when he left the sales job to run Lombard for a short period, I took over from Andy, and he gave me the first opportunity to move from the dark side and risk into the sales arena. And that opportunity was huge for my career, but also it enabled me to look a little bit about how he leads, and he leads very much through followership. At Lombard, there was a particular moment, and if he hadn't got the CEO job, I think Arthur Lombard would have walked out. It literally was, they'd walk off a cliff for him. And whilst I'll never emulate that level of followership, it's something to try and emulate if you can, I think.
It is. It's actually, the subject of followership's relatively new as a phrase, although it's clearly underneath it, it's been there for a long time, but it's now developed as a subject matter in its own right, hasn't it? In terms of, we all have bosses, and we have to manage down and manage up and work collaboratively, be useful, but know when to follow. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think if you can engender qualities that people want to follow you, that's got to be a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So shifting gear a little bit and looking forwards, how do you see the industry evolving over the next, say, 2 years, 10 years? So a short horizon and a long horizon.
Yeah. I think it's going to evolve massively. I think a 10-year horizon is a very brave man to put any predictions on that, really. Over a 2-year horizon, I think we're going through really interesting times at the moment. You've got some real drivers. Obviously, it would be remiss not to mention technology and the huge advancements that's facilitating, but regulation, liquidity, capital requirements, etc. I think there's a few things that are going to change. I think if I look at just the asset finance leasing world, I think something that's really not advanced as much as I thought it would have done is the benefit that technology brings to data around asset usage and value. So we've seen a big shift in the asset finance space away from operating leases and into finance leases, and more latterly into loans and cash, which is weirdly dumbing down the leasing industry into what is effectively just a cash product to buy a piece of kit. I think technology has got a potential to redress that balance again and start to really sell in the customer benefits and features of an operating lease type scenario where you're literally paying for usage, value based on usage, et cetera. Now, not all asset classes will fit into that, but I think a lot will. And I'd like to see that come back, because I think we're dumbing down the industry a little bit by just moving to sort of cash purchases and loan.
And a lot of that, you think, just to get your view, some of that business is flowing into that direction simply due to less friction. There's much less steps. It's much less involved in an unsecured,
massively,
in a finance product. So water flows to its easiest path. So your point is, we know there's product suitability in the leasing space, so some of that lending shouldn't go that way because there's better commercial terms, better risk management for the lender and the borrower, on an asset. So with technology, we can help make that whole journey more frictionless, more easy. Therefore, the water will naturally flow back to a product that's more suitable.
I think so. Ultimately, it's like any advancement. It comes in stages, and it has unintended consequences at each one of those stages. And I think one of the unintended consequences we are hearing about, wanting to ultimately mitigate right now, is the unintended consequence of that low friction availability of fast loans. Yeah. For a broker who wants to provide finance for an asset, it's a much simpler route to providing the cash to your customer to get that asset, because there's been great fintech advancements around, facilitating that customer journey for simple loans. As the technology advances, that level of comfort and simplicity with the product journey should capture more and more complex products. And I think as it does, the product features will start to be the customer benefit again, as opposed to the speed. And I think that's a nice journey that we're going to go on. But at the moment, we're having to sort of stick fingers in bridges, I think, and stick fingers in cracks around some of those unintended consequences to make sure that we create the guardrails to make sure the customer experience is as it should be. And at the moment, around the edges, we're getting some less than perfect customer experiences, I think.
Indeed. And there are still elements. Well, obviously, every lender, particularly asset lenders, need to lend safely first and foremost, and then obviously customer experience and creating an attractive proposition. So you bring in the type of customers that you want, but it must always be safe in every circumstance. But there are limitations on some of the foundational things that make making safe steps quite friction. One of them being data on assets, for example. There isn't one place to go like CAP HPI for equipment where you spent most of your career. So is it that in a 10-year view that will get solved one way or the other?
The 10-year view is so far out there. I tend to be a bit of a I don't know whether it's not a pessimist, it's a futurist, whatever. I think I assume that the future will be infinitely more advanced than it probably will be. Because in 10 years' time, I think we're going to be looking at a very different world, let alone very different asset capabilities. And I can't help but think that the pace of advancement in technology and AI, the ability for data to be amalgamated, shared, and intelligence to be born out of it, should be able to, it would be a really sad indictment on our world if we couldn't share that information for the greater good.
It ought to be a just connect, pull, verify.
Absolutely. So, you think the primary processes within a lending journey, data collection, customer need. Let's start with customer need first. Customer need, data collection, presenting that proposition, underwriting the proposition, getting your money back, and then recycling the asset at some point. Each one of those different processes has got so much scope to improve from where we are today and to standardize to some extent, because, you look across the piece, you've still got some people using pen and paper, and you've got other at the other end of the equation, very nearly at the cutting edge of technology. So
it's interesting. Things like connected assets will help because we'll know where assets are
I remember going to conferences probably not far on 10 years ago with, the Internet of Things was like the big buzzword. But it's not really gone anywhere as far as I can see. Photocopiers, okay, great. But and I'm being disingenuous, but I don't think it's gone as far as I would have presumed it would have done by now, through the different asset classes as well. I think machine tools, photocopiers, technology, assets tend to fall quite nicely into that model, but there are others I think that could easily fall into that model.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. I was talking to someone recently about this, how a lot of technology is being deployed at the moment to make the same process better, rather than reimagining the process. Do we need that step, or could we solve that underlying question better, faster by another way.
And that's probably a better answer to your 2 years versus 10 year, because I think a lot of the activity I'm seeing at the moment is an attempt to automate or make more productive existing processes, as opposed to reimagining the process.
That's it.
Now, that's not always the case, and
Of
I
course,
think there are always use cases where people are taking those step changes, but it's been such a traditional industry that I think we are naturally inclined to try and automate what we're doing as opposed to think differently. You've also got that sort of human versus automation push and pull, yeah? Because you've got an advisory type solution versus a transactional solution or requirement, should we say. And I think you've got in that advisory space, we're relational beings, and I think we'll always be relational beings, and people want to speak to someone, even though they've got the answer, they probably want that reference point to say, so explain this a little bit better, is this the right thing? What are my options? And then a transactional space, it might be someone who's just said, I need it tomorrow, I don't want it now, push a button, thanks very much, I'll have it. Yeah. And I think technology use cases are very different in those two scenarios. I think the transactional one will lend itself more to a entirely holistic auto technology based solution. The more advisory route, I think, is going to be more of an augmented solution where it's a bit like a doctor scenario. You can, as a doctor, you want to speak to your doctor because they give you that human touch. But in reality, the diagnosis has probably been done by a bunch of tech and AI that is infinitely more productive and robust than any human sort of diagnosis could be.
But it's a great analogy, the doctor one, and it's similar in the SME lending space. It'd be great to get your thoughts, because we'll follow the analogy for a second. The first time you go to the doctor with a new problem, you need to talk to them, explain it to them, understand it, think about options, what are the risks and pitfalls of different various things, and is it worth doing this step, that step, or should you do that first? Eventually select a solution and go. Maybe they prescribe something to you, great, so you go and collect it. And now when you get a repeat prescription a month later, you might not need all that. You just need to go and have it done and collect it. And similarly in the relation, obviously the analogy with an SME lender who's new and putting their business on the line, maybe they're putting a PG, there's a lot of anxiety amongst that business, particularly if they haven't used leasing before of any product. Then they need a lot of human interaction at that point. And value it enormously, and we can't remove that entirely from the industry. But that's a use case that needs it. On their fifth van, they might not need that. Same customer, same asset.
So it's a fair point, but again, I think businesses are organic. Yeah, they grow and their needs change. As they grow, needs change, and their availability, the availability of certain funding options, grow with scale and complexity as well. So, a new start business might have relatively limited options. A mid-growth business or a high-growth business or a scaled business all have different access to different markets based on the risk profile of those different market providers. So I think you can fall into the trap of thinking, oh, well, this is the solution I was given, therefore this is the only solution available. But if anything, the network and sheer scale of options financially now, both from product, risk, liquidity, is so big that you do need someone to help guide you through that process to make sure you end up with the right solution. And I think that's part of the problem, where the low friction instant access scenario can give rise to more medium and long-term problems, because you default to the easy solution as opposed to taking the time to think about what the right solution is. And that's no one's problem, no one's fault. The SME, or if you're the patient, as it were, in that scenario, needs to get to the point where they're educated enough to say, right, well, this is what I think I need, or know that they need to speak to someone who can give that advice impartially and fairly. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, now in my role, we talk a lot about automating elements of the customer journey, and I have customers sometimes that say to me, right, we want to automate that, and often I'll say, for which customers are you automating that for? Because, and often, sometimes they've thought it through and it's excellent. They've got a great customer-centric strategy, but sometimes they don't, and they're just doing it for all. And to your point, it's...
And I think that this is where, we talked earlier around automating a solution as opposed to it being something that moves with the customer. So, sort of repeating that process that's in existence today rather than reimagining the process.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think technology now can be used to automate what we do. Yeah. Technology tomorrow can accommodate those steps outside the norm and create that bespoke experience from a standard set of input data, so that you don't end up with necessarily, the same old widget at the output from this process. And I think using technology well has to enhance the customer experience as opposed to the provider's experience.
Yes. And as to your, and picking up what you say there is technology tomorrow, or even dare I say today, if you choose the right one, is you can have multiple journeys for different customer sets. I mean, the personalization can go to the nth degree, but you can set up, 5, 6, 8, 9 different customer journeys. So you make sure you're not, for want of a better word, shoehorning everyone down one. And that's what the decision used to be in the past. If I put something in there, it applies to everyone. So it doesn't have to apply to everyone anymore.
And you've got rules and regulations out there, that depending on the journey you take, the customer type you are, a different set of regulatory rules will be relevant, and they change. Yeah. So I've been burned before where we've hard coded regulatory expectations into a system. Regulations have changed, the system hasn't, and all of a sudden you're non-compliant. And it's quite costly when that happens. Yeah. So you've got to be very careful how you codify bespoke journeys, because there's a lot of complexity out there that needs constant consideration. That's why I think, augmented models, I think, are probably going to be the likely choice for some time to come, until such time that, we're no longer here and we're controlled by robotrons, wherever they are. Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah, exactly. It's a really interesting space that, and I think a lot of lenders and brokers too, we had the same challenge on the sort of 10-year view. How can we look 10 years in the future? There's so many fundamental macro things happening today. I haven't checked the news today, but you wince when you do. It changes. There's a lot that happens all the time, that it's very hard to predict with confidence where things are going. But what you know, and when I experience this a lot from the clients that we talk to, is we know that things are changing, but we don't know at what speed, and we don't know which one's going to come first. But what I do know is what I've got right now is really slow to change. So that business agility is in brokers and in lenders, that's the biggest driver of investment right now, because I'm not sure in the future, but I need to be able to move quickly on whatever comes.
Absolutely. But it's a mindset as well. It's a mindset to be able to change and to be able to seize opportunities quicker than the next person. You've looked at economic forecasts. The further you go out, it becomes a line.
Yes. Yeah, indeed. It's remarkably steady when you go on the long view.
You try and do a 3-year financial forecast for a business. It's take last year and multiply by X. There are very few genuine things that you can predict any more than 2 years out, really. But what you can ready yourself for is the ability to act on opportunity. And I think technology, particularly for the smaller, more agile operators, is providing that level of agility that they can then move quickly to pounce on opportunity.
Exactly. And indeed avoid risks as they come.
Yeah.
Because we've had a few of those in the last...
Absolutely. But the thought now of, being able to produce a prototype system, by putting, 7 well-articulated prompts in an AI bot,
and indeed,
which would have taken 6 weeks and cost you a shed load of money.
Exactly. You can experiment with that.
Yeah.
Try it. Does it work? No. Change it.
Exactly.
It doesn't.
I'm not saying AI is the answer to everything, because it's not, and it's got to be used very carefully. But it's
quite exciting though, isn't it?
It's really exciting. Yeah.
And we're still at day 0, really.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So on that, building on that question, so what do you see as the most exciting, what's happening in the future? What's the most exciting part of the industry? Where are we going? What kind of makes you excited about how we're evolving as an industry?
It might seem a dumb answer, but it's the uncertainty that excites me, because I'm a guy who tends to work from first principles, who's quite scientific, logically structured, and therefore an environment where you have to analyze, adjust, and build on a regular basis is a sort of natural habitat. An environment where you sort of know the road and you drive along it quite straight. I'm sort of uncomfortable in that scenario. Yeah. So what excites me is just the pure scale of opportunity that we've got and the sheer level of change that's going to come with it. Probably at a stage in my career where, I'll be looking to the new boys to sort of take us to that next level, and we'll be, a very interested observer from the sidelines in 10 years' time, maybe. Sorry? Absolutely. And it's, look, I mean, AI has to, the speed of its advancement, it's going to create things and opportunities and risks that we can barely comprehend right now. There's one of my team, and I won't steal the quote because it was entirely hers, changed AI into intelligent automation, and I think that's a better way of thinking about it right now, rather than just jumping to the AI solution. It's, AI might be involved, but how do we do what we do, or how do we change what we do, but do it in a more productive manner? And AI's capabilities might come into that, but they might not. So it'd be useful and really interesting to see that. I think it'd be useful to see and exciting to see the role of the broker and the lender and how they change. Because I think if I look at its most simplistic level, the lenders are in charge of a commodity, and their purpose is to deliver that commodity to a user in the most efficient manner. And the brokers right now are in charge of a very rare resource, which is a customer and a borrower. And they've got to nurture that customer, and they've got to protect that customer, and they've got to deliver a great solution for that customer. That's a more challenging role than delivering a commodity the most efficiently where you can. And I think lenders are going to try and ultimately get into that customer direct at some point, and the disintermediation risk kicks in at that point. So I think anybody who's got access to, control of, and can deliver a great customer solution, whether you're a lender, a broker, or a hybrid, are the people who are going to have a really interesting role to play in the future. I think anyone who sticks to a singular model has to be really, really good at it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you don't follow the advancements of technology in whatever little part of that process you take, you're going to get left behind, and left behind quite badly, I think. Even where you've got a relational model.
Absolutely, and it's not a binary decision like we said before. Is it tech or not? It's how to merge the two together,
exactly, yeah,
and embrace it and get the benefits of both. And equally with tech, in many scenarios, a solely digital journey won't be appropriate.
Yeah, completely. And I think people will rebel against it to some extent. And even now, you see that I'm the same with my phone. I'm getting twitchy. I'm touching it on my pocket at the minute. We become so addicted to it, but I think there'll be a backlash at some point that says, you know what, there's a world out there that we need to start appreciating a little bit more. And I think hopefully we'll redress the balance, because I think it's going a little bit too far one way at the moment.
Indeed. We forget that a business owner, when they take out debt, they might be putting that business on the line, potentially even family home, and that's it's not like buying a pizza.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a little bit different. Yeah. I'm going to shift gear briefly now and do a little game with you, if that's okay. It's just a bit of fun, and there's no right or wrong answer. And I've not prepped you at all. Oh, yeah, exactly. I've not prepped you for this, so you've got no idea what's coming. But don't worry. It's a very simple game of would you rather.
Okay.
And I'm just going to give you two scenarios.
All right.
And just
keep
say,
it clean.
That one or that one. It is all clean.
Yeah.
Don't worry. And it's all sort of professional. So first one, would you rather a risk committee or a project steerco?
Oh my God, lesser of two evils. Risk committee.
Risk committee. There's your old risk background coming through, isn't it?
I can probably hold my own in a risk committee.
Next one, a bad interview where you realise quite quickly, as in you're giving the interview, not in it. You're giving an interview and you realise quite early it's a total waste of your time.
Yep.
Or turning up to a meeting, lots of people with no agenda or structure when you're super busy.
Oh, I hate the latter. Purposeless meetings. Yeah.
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 Okay. Third one, learn and grow from a mistake or avoid a risk.
Oh, learn and grow from a mistake every time. Yeah, I've made hundreds. Yeah, and I will make hundreds more.
Very good. This one's a bit of fun. A bad cup of coffee or a dry donut.
Bad cup of coffee. Can't live without coffee. So any form of
take
coffee
the caffeine,
works.
then whichever way it goes,
yeah.
it's functional, as well as a good one.
Yeah.
All right, two more. Feeling the team camaraderie and working through an urgent crisis, and you're in it, or knuckling down to get something completed yourself.
Oh, the camaraderie piece. I think it's you can't plan it. That's the thing. You can plan your own. You can say, right, I'm going to pull an all-nighter here and just grind through it. And there's some degree of satisfaction with getting something done, but that magic that happens, it doesn't always happen regularly, but when it does, and you all pull together as a team and you get it over the line, that's a massive, plus feeling, I think.
Forget the feeling where it says, team comes together in the first crisis, because you all.
The NACFB have got a wonderful team, and we have 3 or 4 really big events a year. And it's always at the big events where every function within the association has to pull together, and it's always, these things are always got last minute deadlines, last minute issues that we're able to get off forever. But they always, I'm kissed to death now, but they always seem to pull it off and deliver really, really fantastic events.
Yeah,
and the Expo is a classic example of that. But the buzz that we get from all coming out of that is fantastic.
There's a crescendo towards the end, isn't there?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's great. Last one, and the last final question. So present to the whole team to inspire the future, or motivate a key employee one-to-one.
Ooh, I think I'm better one-to-one. It's great if you can motivate the whole team, but I don't think you ever can the whole team. There's always going to be, a selection of any audience of a certain scale where they disagree with what you're saying, or they don't share that same belief. And I struggle with that to some extent, because it's, it's that fellowship again. I like to be liked, I like to have the answer. But I think I'm probably more productive and can add more value on a one-to-one.
Yeah. Very good. At the end of the game. There you go. nice and easy. Very last question, before we wrap up. So if you could change one thing about the industry, magic wand or whatever you want to say, what would that be?
So I'm going to probably go something a bit off-piste, because it would be behaviors. So I think our industry is fabulous. It's got some amazing people in it, and we do some amazingly good things. And without being the crass, the engine room of UK PLC. But there are a few bad actors. And if I could change one thing, it would be to just impart the needs of the customer and good customer outcomes in all participants within our industry.
All by none.
Yeah, because I think, everybody wins when the customer wins. If you take advantage of the customer, the industry gets damaged. And it's such an easy equation. It's so frustrating when people take advantage for short-term gain. And I think, there's enough pie to go around. Let's just behave in the right way to the customer, because everything falls from that.
Yeah, agreed.
So that would be my one thing I would change.
Very good. Very good. Well, thank you, Jim, for a candid and really enjoyable discussion. It was great, both inspiring and true to form on your human style. So thank you. I'm certain your story will be inspiring for those that watch it. Far from being the closing chapter of your career, it's very clear that you've got unfinished business. We've got a lot more, Jim.
Hopefully,
to see.
Yeah. Hopefully,
yeah.
Yep.
So this is not like
if anyone will have me.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. Well, as an industry, we sort of look forward to seeing how it all goes next, and obviously and the time you've got in the NACFB. It's a very exciting time. So that brings us to the close of this edition of NETSOL's Wired and Inspired. Thank you very much for listening. Please do tune in for future interviews. Thank you.
Cheers, Jeff.